Good morning to you all. I hope that you're keeping warm this morning, as it is freezing up here on stage. But so a few weeks ago, I got on a phone call with one of the members at the church on their birthday, and it was also a particular member who hasn't been attending church for a while. And so we got talking about various things, and then I broached the subject with them as to, hey, where have you been? We haven't been seeing you at church. And so they were very candid and honest and straightforward with me as to their reasons for why they haven't been attending. And they simply said this. They said, buddy, I'll just be very honest with you as to say that we have just fallen out of the habit of attending church regularly. I wish I had a deeper answer to give you, but that's just it. We are not prioritizing our church attendance at the moment. Now, as hard as that might be to hear, I'm sure that many of us here present in the room this morning know of certain family members of you or even friends in our circles who are not actually regularly connecting or attending church during this time. And so some people here are in a similar boat. And so we can understand that and actually comprehend that a bit. But what I want to do this morning, and perhaps even you this morning, are here for the very first time in a while. And so what I'm hoping that this morning, through God's word this morning, what would happen within us is that God would rekindle within us actually a deep love and a deep heart that wants to actually reconnect and connect meaningfully with the local church as we live out our calling in society as God's people whom he has called to actually bringing great glory in society. And so last week, as Sandy said, we resumed into our series, A Life of Significance, in the book of 1 Peter. And what we did last week was establish, in a sense, the premise that a life of significance is a life of honor. The life of significance is a life of honor, that we as God's people, Christians, are called to showcase to the world the character and the goodness of God. That's our calling as a people of God. And so from where we left off in chapter 2, verse 11, then it follows, if that's indeed our calling, that Peter will go on to then say these words, that beloved, verse 11, I urge you as sojourners and exiles. And so he's writing to a group of Christians who were foreigners in the land where they were aliens. And because they were foreigners in their land, they would actually be marginalized and disenfranchised by that society and also suffering persecution and oppression for their faith. And so he's writing to them in those realities in their society as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. And so he's saying, hey, you've got something to protect. The passions of the flesh, you need to protect yourselves, protect your souls against those passions and those temptations from within and temptations in the world. Protect yourselves against that which wage war against your souls. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles. And so Gentiles here in this text can be best as understood as non-Christians, unbelievers. And so he's saying, keep your conduct among non-Christians honorable. There's a calling again of honor. Honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, and so they misrepresent you, malign you, assassinate your character for the things you're doing, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. And so our conduct within society matters dearly. That as the people of God, we are called to be a people that will be committed by our honorable conduct to bring God glory as his people. And so we as Christians are not meant to actually just mimic the things we see in the world. No. We're actually meant to be a people that set a countercultural standard of behavior as we seek to try to glorify God within society. Here's how Bible commentator Scott McKnight puts it. He says this, the Christian is the one who is countercultural because he or she is out of step with trends and passions in culture. It is not this way because we are trying to be odd. We are odd because we are trying to be godly. We're trying to be godly. Again, countercultural living is not not the goal of the Christian. Rather, countercultural living is the result of following Jesus Christ. The result of following Jesus Christ. And so there's the exhortation again in verse 12. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable as you follow Jesus Christ. As you look to follow Jesus Christ indeed within the society that we find ourselves in. Now, as we processing that call throughout, and it will be the one main call that Peter will have throughout this section. Then week on week, we will only have one main application, week on week, as we are going through the book of 1 Peter, and it is simply this: honor as you follow Jesus Christ. Honor the things that God is calling you to honor as you follow Jesus Christ. And last week we talked about how this idea of biblical honor is actually ascribing to great worth and value to something, that you would deem it to be so precious that you will hold it to high regard. And because you hold it in such a high regard, you're prepared to subject yourself to it and actually give it the respect that it deserves. And so throughout 1 Peter, in the next few messages in the book, we will see Peter constantly calling us to honor certain social institutions as Christians, as we lead lives that will proclaim the goodness and the glory of God in society. And so this week, we want to look at the first social institution that Peter will call us to actually honor. And you'll discover as we'll go through it, that it is actually, the first social institution worth to honor is actually the local church. The local church, as you will see. Now, why would Peter call us to honor the local church? Because as he will go on to explain, it is precisely because of this reason, that the local church is the primary institution from which Christians are to live out their calling in society. And so the local church is the primary institution from which Christians are to live out their calling in society. And so it is primarily through the local church that we'll be able to lead lives of honor within society. Now, just taking this statement for a moment, that the local church is a primary institution from which Christians are to live out their calling within society. It is a mother of a statement to make, right? And may even generate in some of us an instinctive negative response towards it. That's because, unknowingly perhaps, we may actually ascribe to a deep functional belief, which just says that I don't need anyone else in my life in order to glorify God. That I don't need anyone else in my life in order to glorify God. Unknowingly, perhaps, we may actually hold to that belief in impacting the way in which we lead our Christian lives. That when it comes to the glory of God, it is just solely a matter between me and God and depends solely on my actions and on me alone. And so then when we read a statement like that the local church is the primary institution from which Christians are to live out their calling in society, instinctively we may feel that perhaps, and some of us may want to demand and say, what is that statement then saying, that I cannot primarily honor or glorify God in my life apart from the local church? Friends, that's precisely what it means. It's precisely what it means. Don't take my word for it, but come with me back into the book of 1 Peter, looking at verse 9, which we looked at last week. And when we looked at it, I said it is the premise. It is a premise upon which we must build this conviction of a life of honor in society. So look at verse 9 again, and let's do some work there to see this. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, God's own possession. And so both in his use of the plural pronoun in you, that starts that verse in you are, and then the use of these collective descriptors of race, priesthood, nation, people. Peter has in mind not the individual Christian, but the communal body of the church. That's what he has in mind. And so it's on the church as a group that God has called to be precisely these very things: a race, priesthood, nation, and people. The individual Christian cannot be the ultimate representation of these four identity markers. You cannot, as an individual, be a race and a nation and a priesthood and a people all on your own. Which then follows that the purpose that he goes on to lay for us in verse 9, that you may proclaim, again, plural, the excellencies of God, who called you, plural again, out of darkness into his marvelous light. That's a purpose extended to the communal body of the people of God. A purpose that you cannot fulfill on your own as a lone ranger. In fact, the reason why the individual Christian is actually able to fulfill this calling is because he or she belongs to the people to whom God has extended this calling to. That's why. And so then, what are we seeing? We're seeing that it is primarily as we connect to the local church that we actually get to live out the calling of God over the local church. And that's to bring him glory through our honorable conduct within the people of God. Now, let's clarify something also here by way of, in addition. When we're talking about that the local church is the primary institution through which Christians are to live out their calling in society, we're not just talking about attendance at church on a Sunday, as important as that is to the life of a Christian. Now, here's why it doesn't just mean a Sunday attendance, although we need it. Why it doesn't just mean that. When you think about those four descriptors, identity markers of the people of God, a race, a priesthood, a nation, a people, not only are those descriptors revealing that there needs to be more than just a single individual involved, right? That you cannot just as one individual be all those things, that there needs to be more individuals. And so in a sense that there needs to be a community of people involved in that process, being these things. But it is also affirming diversity and intimacy. How? Because if more than just one individual is needed in that community, then there is a diversity of personalities within that community that will then need to relate to one another in a healthy, intimate way if they are to fulfill God's calling over them to bring him glory as a community. And so we're seeing in these four identity markers the call for us to be a people that embrace community, diversity, and intimacy as we look to fulfill God's calling over us as a local church. It's more than just being individuals that actually are like ships in a night towards one another. No, we're actually being called to deep, relatable relationships with each other. much against what our modern day church attendance practices may actually reduce us to. No, we're supposed to press in, invest in making sure that we're experiencing a personable and relatable community where we are in relationship together as we look to fulfill the call of God over us as a people. Which then follows, then here comes the main application from those verses for us will be simply this: to honor your local church community wholeheartedly. Honor your local church community wholeheartedly. And so really from the heart, with deep, faithful, and fervent commitment to her and the calling of God over her, to reveal and proclaim his character and his goodness in the world. Now, my guess is that most of us may find that calling agreeable, if we have no problem in that. But this is where we need to be a bit more honest with ourselves, right? We all know of many Christians in our lives that do not honor their local church wholeheartedly as they should. Many Christians who do not show the local church the respect that she deserves, who are always constantly criticizing and critical towards the local church, immunize themselves from active and vibrant participation in the life of the local church without a care for what that kind of neglect will do to their walks with God. And so let's face it, many Christians do not honor their local church community wholeheartedly as they should. Which is why then, for those of us who are here this morning and those who are also online, we need to be asking ourselves the questions, interrogating ourselves. Am I honoring my local church wholeheartedly? Giving to her the respect she deserves from me as one who belongs to the people of God and the calling that she has over it. And so if we are to honor the local church community wholeheartedly, it would involve how we are seeing her, connecting to her, and acting through her. How we're seeing her, connecting to her, and acting through her within the society that God has placed us in. Why? Because by God's grace, he has made it such that as we choose to honor the local church in that manner, through the way we're seeing her, the way we're connecting to her, the way we are acting through her, it will lead us to impact the society around us to his glory. And so let's take it one by one, how we are seeing the local church. And so when you reflect upon the impact of our Western cultural norms on the local church, you realize and you see that we have somehow, the impact of Western cultural norm, especially the value of individualism, has resulted actually in us starting to see or deem individual piety as the true tell sign of Christian fidelity. What do I mean by that? We then land up judging our commitment to the glory of God solely through our own individual acts of faithfulness. That's how we end up seeing that I'm someone committed, faithful, because of my actions alone. When actually the scriptures will teach us that the glory of God is amplified in community. It is amplified in community. And so you see it in a few ways, even in the text of 1 Peter. And so these two, the exhortation in verse 9 and verse 12 of a communal nature. And so that you may, as a community, proclaim the excellencies of God, verse 9, and then verse 12, that you will keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. The fact that these exhortations of a communal nature is actually telling us that the glory that God receives through our communal acts of faithfulness towards God is far more desirable and effective in the real world. then we tend to actually judge it as being. And so then what we're then being called here is to actually cultivate our view of the community, of the people of God. Invest in your conviction of how the people of God are actually meant to act together in society for the glory of God. And so it lies for us an opportunity to seize, an opportunity to own as the people of God, that we will be committed. Because if our lives in community is vital, as Peter is saying, vital to be in that race, that priesthood, that nation, that people, if it's vital to that, then we ought to be taking every step necessary in our lives to invest in the corporate testimony of the people of God to whom we belong to. And so how are you seeing our local church and endeavoring to honor your local church through the ways you see her and are convicted about life in that church? Second, how you connect. Honoring the local church will involve how you connect to the local church. Now, on just a human level, we will all agree that one cannot claim to belong to a certain community of people without having some tangible ways that identifies them as being part of that community, right? And so you think for a moment in your own homes. No one gets to just walk in there and be treated as a family member, do they? No, not. Right? The people that you treat in your home as family members, there's a reason for it. Right? And so likewise with the local church. A church that's called to be a community and a family. And so you've got to have something meaningful, tangible, that is actually associating you as belonging to that church, local church family, as a family member of that particular local church and not just another. But church membership actually means a lot more than just your signature on a membership form that says that you belong to that local church. It means a lot more than that. Because if we are to be part of and parcel of the local expression of that chosen race, that royal priesthood, that holy nation, that people of God's own possession, it will mean that we need to invest a lot more of our time in actually building meaningful connections within that local church as its members. And so it means connecting deeply and engaging deeply in the life of that local church. That's what church membership is supposed to mean. You're connected into the life of that church. And because you're connected into the life of that church, you're fulfilling certain responsibilities as a member of that particular community. Now, church membership has its own sets of challenges. So we look to try to connect deeply into the life of a local church. There are two in particular that I want to highlight this morning that I see affecting our local church, BBC. These two challenges are the impact of COVID on church attendance, and then the second thing, the changes that we've seen in the demographic of our congregation. And so when you think about church attendance, as I've said, in of itself is not the end-all and be-all, church attendance. It's not the ultimate point, as I hope that you're seeing. What is the ultimate point is that we will be plugged into and really engaged and actively and vibrantly contributing to the life of that local church. But here's the thing, you cannot meaningfully contribute in that manner if you would not at least be attending regularly the gathering of that body. And so the impact of COVID or COVID on Christians' commitments to their local church is being felt globally. And one area in which you're seeing it play itself out in the lack of attendance of people to their Sunday services as a local church. And so people aren't attending as they used to. And like I said at the beginning, you may have friends, you may have family members whom you know that who are not connecting consistently anymore with a local church or in any other capacity. But there lies for us an opportunity in God's grace to actually live out this calling, to act honorably towards those brothers and sisters of ours in Christ by calling them to re-engage with your local church through attending and being part of its life. That's an opportunity for us. Think about it for a moment. You would have no qualms recommending to them a good restaurant that they should eat at, or the best place in town for that deal, to find a good deal on that thing that they're looking for, or give them some advice around what's happening at work, or some tips on an exercise, best tips on an exercise routine. You wouldn't have qualms doing that. Then how much more shouldn't we be afraid to engage them on matters that pertains to their soul? Asking them and being brave in asking them, in challenging them, calling them, re-engage with the people of God for the benefits that it will do on your faith and walk with God. Would we seize that opportunity to call those friends, those family members, re-engage so that you will live out the calling of God that is upon your life in community with the people of God. The second challenge, as I said, is the change in the demographics of BBC as a congregation, especially in the last 2 years or so. And so we've just seen lots of changes in the sense that there's lots of people who used to be here who no longer are. And there are many others who used to be somewhere else who are now here at this church. Now, whether you're new or would consider yourself as part of the furniture, that can be quite kind of starting to see and actually take you aback for a moment. Because at any one point in time, we can all just look around and realize that there's lots of people here that I do not know. And they can feel quite strange. And what happens when we find ourselves in strange places? Look to try to disengage because of how uncomfortable it makes us feel. But then again, there is an opportunity there for us as the people of God, as those who are called to be the local expression of a race, priesthood, nation, and a people for his own possession, to form new, meaningful relationships, to create new bonds of fellowship with one another. And we seek to live out this corporate calling that God has got over us as his people in the world. Not to disengage, but see it as an opportunity. Because later on in that foyer, we can all just stop for a moment and turn around and look and see and realize that there's so many people around us that we don't know. Now, for those of us who consider ourselves as part of the furniture, that can be quite sad, because we then can see and realize that we once upon a time used to look around and see some of our family and friends that we're now missing. And for those of us who are new, it can feel quite lonely as you wonder whether you'll actually be able to fit in here and be one with the people who are here. But again, isn't that an opportunity to us all? To actually press into the community, the diversity we're seeing, with great intimacy as we pursue God's calling over us, his people, to bring him great glory as a people through our acts, our corporate and communal acts of faithfulness in honor within society. Grab hold, seize, lay hold of that opportunity, because this is just reality truth, right? No relatable or personable community has ever come about without the deliberate efforts of its members. No community can be built without the deliberate efforts of its members. And so seize that opportunity. And so if you're looking to honor your local church community wholeheartedly in how you're seeing her, in how you're connecting to her, then third, in how you're acting through her. And so when you look at the imperatives in verses 11 and 12, and so the first imperative is put this way: to abstain from the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. And then the second imperative is to keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they see your good deeds, they may glorify God in the day of visitation. Those two imperatives may seem like they are two separate imperatives, but they are actually just one. It's just making one point in both the negative and positive sense. And so in the negative, he's calling us to actually abstain from the passions of the flesh. And so stay away from those things. How are you supposed to stay away from them? In the positive, by keeping your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, in verse 12. And then later on that conduct plays itself out in the verse as the good deeds you do. That's how you're supposed to show that. And so he's making the same call with both those things. And so at the heart of his call is simply this. Here's what Peter is saying, which is phenomenal to think about. Peter is saying that be the kind of community that takes certain acts, the kinds of actions, or takes the kind of action that will lead to the protection, both the protection and salvation of souls among you. That's what he is saying, which is phenomenal to think about, because you will be forgiven for actually thinking, wait a minute, isn't it only God who has the power to protect and save souls? So what do we have to contribute to that, right? That we, through our acts, our conduct, our honorable conduct, would actually be part and parcel of how God will be saving and protecting souls. It seems too hard to believe, right? But look again at how Peter actually ends with verse 12. But what he's saying is actually the ultimate goal of you abstaining from the passions that wage war against your soul, from you keeping your conduct honorable among the Gentiles through your good deeds. Here's the ultimate goal, that unbelievers may see your good deeds. Even though they may malign you, criticize you, and all this, ultimately they will see your good deeds and glorify God. Glorify God on the day of visitation. Tell me, how is an unbeliever ever going to glorify God if not through their ultimate conversion and worship of God? That's what Peter is actually teaching you. And so he's teaching us the all-important role that the local church community has to play in God's process of reconciling sinners to himself. He's saying to us that God has seen it fit to use the local church community in its diversity, with the intimacy that they are cultivating among them, to use that local church community as an instrument of his redeeming grace in sinners' lives, as those sinners watch and observe our honorable conduct as a community. Now, perhaps that may sound like hard to believe that God will do that. Then listen to Jesus himself teaching the same thing. In Matthew 5, verse 13 to 16, especially verse 16, which might be what Peter is actually deliberately alluding to, where Jesus says this, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And so as you look at all those verses, what is Jesus explaining through these verses? He's explaining the impact that God's people can have on society as they advance God's redeeming kingdom. That's what he is explaining. And so there, again, in the ways that we will choose to act through the local church is an opportunity there for us all. That through our conduct as a community, we may act in such a manner that will result in people finding Jesus. That's what we've been called to. And so as we honor the local church through the ways we're seeing her, through the ways we're connecting to her, and through the ways we are acting through her, we actually get to participate in God's calling over her. The calling to be a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, so that by the mercy and the grace of God we have received, we will be able, through his power, to see people come to a living knowledge of him within our society. That's what we've been called to participate in that great call as a people, as a community that reaches people for the sake of Jesus Christ. Now, does that mean the local church is a perfect place, free of causing pain? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But this one thing you can be sure about is that her imperfections and her shortcomings has not disqualified her in God's eyes to be worthy of honor as Jesus Christ's bride. Will you hold her to such honor as you choose to honor your local church community wholeheartedly and participate in its calling to be a light onto a dark world? Amen. We're going to celebrate communion together in a moment. And so in the seats in front of you, there should be the elements, communion elements. And so as we will take, or for those of you in front, just grab one from behind you. So as we take the communion elements, and on top there's a piece of wafer that represents the bread, and then the red juice, we remember that on the night that Jesus Christ was betrayed, he took the bread, he broke it, and he said, "This is my body broken for you." And so by that act, he's saying that he is taking upon himself the punishment of our sins through his body. And then later on, he took the cup and he blessed it. And after he blessed it, he gave it to his disciples. He said, "Yeah, take this, drink this as a show of my blood that purifies you of all iniquity." And so it is through the blood of Jesus Christ that we are cleansed and made pure. And so when we eat and when we drink, we are remembering his ultimate sacrifice, that great mercy and that grace that has come to us as the people of God. But here's the thing. It is through that very same mercy, through that very same grace, that we are now a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. And so I want to invite you, as you take communion today, take it also as a sign of the fact that you have been grafted into the people of God. So that as you eat, as you drink, you would remember your calling to keep your conduct honorable among the world, together as a local community, as we strive to see God bring others into a living knowledge with him. So I'll leave you to do that in a moment, in the quietness of your own heart, to reflect upon that, and then to eat and to drink. And then once we're ready, the music team will lead us into one last song of worship. Let's eat, let's remember, let's eat, let's celebrate the sacrifice of our Lord.